There's 4 seasons in a year, but we're going to talk about the many seasons that we go through in our life. It's an amazing episode, and we're so glad you tuned in today. Well, good morning to all of our friends along the Gulf Coast, and welcome to another episode of the Echo Stop Live podcast. I am Kevin, here with my great friend, Curtis.
What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great, and I have great news for you. We are not in Kansas anymore. We are in a new studio.
If I click my heels, will it put me back where we were?
I don't want anybody to see your shoes, but I will tell you that I'm excited because what we've done is we've created more space, and this is what I want to talk to you about today.
Let's talk about it, brother.
Not just space, but seasons.
Talk about seasons.
Allowing seasons into our lives. So can we have just a real conversation for just a minute?
I thought we always have real conversations.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
So let's try and see where we go with this. But I think that all too often we pick a starting point, and we pick an ending point, and we assess whether we were successful at achieving whatever this goal is by when we arrive at that final point, and we kind of ignore all of the seasons in between. Okay. And so I personally have experienced some different seasons, and I'd like to share some of those today. And I know you have as well, but our community has experienced seasons. Our different agencies within the community have experienced seasons,
right.
and the residents in our community have gone through seasons. And they're not always things that just happen to us. We take control. So I've got like all of these thoughts running out of my mind. I know you're probably thinking that they're running really fast.
And we are talking about seasons, individual seasons, people in their life, right?
Yes.
Not organizations. Okay,
yes.
We are. Okay. Gotcha.
So, let me
stay on track with you.
Yeah, stay on track. I'll give you kind of an example where I'm at.
Okay. All right.
So a while back, I was traveling around, going from one place to another, and I was with some really good friends in a vehicle, and this prayer/thought landed on my heart, and it was that we're always in these positions where we're trying to tell folks like what's happening, or we're trying to encourage people to come do stuff, and that's kind of a leadership thing, which is good. But I really felt like on my heart I needed to be in a season of learning, and I literally just blurted it out. I was like, I need to be in a season of learning, and it wasn't like a day later I get an email from somebody about a class that I had been trying to get into.
Okay.
And I had gotten into that class, and I was like, well, it's official. I'm going to be a student. And so I went through this 6-month training program, just got out of it. And I put myself in a season of learning. But more importantly, I feel like God opened the door for a season of learning. And it's so interesting when you look at things from the opposite side, maybe in a classroom of the desk, or you look at things from the opposite side of where you might normally stand in a roadway or a street, and you get a different perspective. And so for me, a season of learning was I want to learn something, put something back in the bank instead of constantly cashing out. And there's so much value for me in that. And that's just a personal story. And I've been kind of hoping for the opportunity, and look, it all lined up. And I feel like I come back as a better student now. That makes me a better leader, but also makes me a better husband at home, and a father at home, and a coworker at work, and hopefully a friend to my good friend Curtis. But these seasons have so many values that you don't even understand all of what might come in, but are you willing to put yourself in a different season?
Let's continue to unpack that for a second too.
When you talk about
no, we don't need that heavy of a lift, but because you pack heavy, right?
Yeah.
Do you? But here's the thing. I think when we think about seasons of learning, I believe that there's learning in all the seasons. I believe that oftentimes the teacher can never forget that sometimes, more often than not, we should always be ready to pivot back to being the student. We talk about so many different things, parenting being one, okay? No one gets a blueprint on parenting, no matter how great of a parent you may have had or how horrible of a parent you may have had. There's not a blueprint necessarily for how you actually be the parent that you need to be. I will say this, I believe that we have to practice. We have to always be willing to put ourselves as being the student and understand that it is an ever-turning wheel of practice that makes you the teacher, a good teacher, because you're always willing to be the student.
But teacher and student, I mean, are you showing up to class because you want to get marked present? or are you showing up to class to prepare for the test? Because I think you can get two different experiences in that.
Okay.
And it's the same thing with community. We can host a community event and we can show up to the community event and we can be present at the community event, but are we preparing for the test? Are we prepared to take on individuals and mentor them? Are we prepared to bring a booth or help fund an opportunity? Are we prepared to help encourage somebody that might look discouraged or they're not sure where to go? Do we take the lead and help lead somebody? So when I go to a season of learning, I go to a season of learning to come back prepared for a test. Attendance is a requirement. I mean, you have to be present. Right. Hard to learn if you're not there, but merely showing up to me is kind of where I felt that there was this conviction, and I feel like it's the same way. Let's talk about policing for just a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So in law enforcement work in our community here along the Gulf Coast, do we just show up, or are we prepared to pass the test? And what does that test look like? Because it's changed. The test that we were taking a couple of years ago isn't the test we're taking today. There's a lot of unique challenges. There's also a lot of information that if we're just willing to learn it, we can approach things by understanding the story and the situation better, right? What are your thoughts there?
I'll say this first of all to the audience.
Unpack it.
We're not trying to give you riddles because we talk so often about these things. And sometimes, when we talk, you may not necessarily know exactly the road that we're trying to travel down, but we never want to forget that we have passengers with us. So we're going to try to slow it down just a little bit. And I'll say this. When we are in the community, it is important not to just show up in presence, but show up beyond just the presence of being there, because absent of your presence, then it's void. People don't see you, and then when they don't see you, then they forget that you care. I think that what we do in law enforcement here locally, we try to put in position things that will help us help people beyond just the moment in which they are impacted by an incident in which we have an officer come out and do a police report for them. We have victim services, for example. Okay, what does victim services do? They're there after the officer leaves. They're there to stay in contact with that person who's been affected by something horrible that has traumatized them and has created a stall in their life. Their job is to make sure that they stay connected to law enforcement. That's the whole point, making them feel like they're not alone after the dust has settled, because the trauma's still there. So when we talk about, our presence is more than just coming out when the crisis avails itself, but after the crisis is no longer immediate. But there's still always a need for you to still be there in some shape, form, or fashion. So that's why we have victim services.
Well, and I feel like that seasons can change, and we can be placed in seasons. We can place ourselves in seasons. We can come out of seasons. And you can have multiple seasons running at the same time. Like nothing says I'm in this season, I'm not in this season. Like I want to stay in a season of learning. And I feel like the officers that are responding to calls need to stay in a season of caring, right? Stay in a season of understanding, but also stay in a season of professionalism. And remember that even though there may be a higher requirement for understanding and expectation on a particular scene, they were still called to do a very important job that is dangerous, right? And so there's also a season of alertness and awareness that needs to come on, because there's both sides of the story. This isn't, hey, I'm going to drop my guard on everything I do and walk into a dangerous situation. No, you've called to walk into a dangerous situation, but we've given you tools on how to handle it. Victim services is another tool we can put in to not only help heal a particular situation, but to also long-term prevent that cycle from continuing, because we take people out of victim mindsets and we put them into survivor mindsets many times as families, even if they're not the individual directly affected, but the family is directly infected or indirectly affected in many of these situations. What about seasons of growth in our community? We've seen people come, we've seen people go. Residential areas pop up here and there, and people move around. The continuity of community is getting to know your neighbor and building relationships. So, so what are your thoughts on seasons of relationship?
Well, season of relationships, I think God places people in our lives at different times, and He also changes the aspect of that person in your life during that time, in which they're there for a moment, and while they're there, hopefully you're learning from them as they should be learning from you. But there comes a transition in that where you're now being placed in a different season of learning with a different, let's say, a different group of people, where it's like I always equate it to you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy a plant. I don't buy plants, but I'm using this as an example, right? and stay with me, all right? You buy this plant and you nurture this plant in this little small pot, and it grows, right? It's growing, but at what point do you remove it from that pot and place it in another pot so that it may continue to grow? I think that relationships are like that. It's not where you discard the previous relationship and that you don't minimize the importance of the relationship. But in a season of learning, you have to be willing to transition from one place to the next and not be hesitant about that change, but be encouraged by it, knowing that what you're seeking is more enlightenment. You want to learn. You want to not just learn for yourself, but learn and actually go back and share it with someone else.
Well, talking about sharing with someone else, I pose this challenge to our participants, our viewers, the people who have come along on this journey. Like, let's get into a season of participation. And there's several different ways you can do that. And I think now's a perfect time to remind us that we have an email. You can send us emails, and that's echostoplive@gmail.com. And we also have an anonymous tip line. And that number is 844-251-0644. That number is up on the screen right now. Put yourself in a season of participation. Don't be a bystander and stay in a season of bystander-ness. Become a participant, right? Do things that allow you to make your mark in a positive way, and it can be part of the success story.
And let me share something that we're trying to do, and I believe that this will happen for our city, and it's something that so many other law enforcement agencies, I hope, are thinking along those lines, and that is, how do we continue to create opportunities for building relationship with the community and law enforcement? One of the things we're doing right now is along the lines of co-response, dealing with mental health populations, those who are in crisis, those who have neurological disorders, figuring out how do we actually enhance training for law enforcement while at the same time also opening up doors for relationship building between law enforcement and the community and others who are within that umbrella of public safety that we don't always consider, like our health service workers, our education partners, our public health. But our goal is to create this platform for virtual learning, VR technology. This stuff is just fascinating when you think about it, and the fact that we're doing things now that 20 years ago we would have never thought about. How do we apply this to law enforcement? But we're hoping to actually create an environment where we immerse law enforcement officers in a training environment that ignites or taps into every sensory component of their being. Okay, not just the visual aspects of the VR, but their sense of smell, sense of touch, as they relate to or respond to these different scenarios that happen far too often in our communities as it relates to mental health crises, or someone who's affected by autism, someone who's a care provider. I think the community would appreciate the fact that we're trying to take these steps to improve our relationship.
Well, and we'll find out, but we won't know until people give us feedback on it. So I certainly feel like we're in the right direction with that. All right, so let me challenge you to a quick game. I know you don't like riddles, so we'll play a game. You want to play a game? We're going to call it Four Seasons. Are you ready?
Okay, Batman. What you got?
Okay, Batman didn't play in Four Seasons, but all right. So there's two of us, so we'll each get 2 seasons. So you tell me, best season of your life, worst season of your life.
All right, what you got?
You're first.
Oh my goodness. Worst season of my life?
Yeah.
I'm gonna toss it back to you. I'm still thinking.
Okay, I can tell you because mine is super clear.
Okay.
So I remember living in a season of control where I felt like I could make all of the right decisions and I could control every single thing. And some things worked out and a lot of things didn't work out. And the flip side to that for me was when I finally really started listening. More than controlling. I put myself in a season of obedience, right? And that's when my faith really sprung loose. And I started following it, and to the point where I can't ever catch up, right? Because that fire is just burning so heavy. But I look back at that season in my life where I felt like I was in control. And why aren't things working out the way they're supposed to? It's maybe because I was trying to make, the math add up when the math was already determined what it was. So for me, worst season would be season of control. The best season is season of obedience.
But here's mine. I was once in a season of I. Okay, everything was about me. It was about, how does this benefit me? How does this, whatever, me or I, very inward. Thankfully, I thank God that it's been many years ago. but when we are inward, we miss absolutely everything that God has to show us. And when we change that mode of thinking, we start to see the things that we need to see at that present moment. But we also are very sober to the fact that time is something that we don't get back.
Wow.
Okay. And because whenever we are absent of the present, we are losing one of the most precious things that God gave us, and that's time and people.
Wow. So that's cool. And that's really cool to hear you say, because that explains a lot about how it is that we both wound up here, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, what is our call to action for the community, right? So what season do we need to join together with for our community right now so that we can take what it is we started and really push it to the next level, and something that the community can participate with us, alongside of us, not watch us, not a spectator, but actually a participant, somebody on the team. What kinds of seasons? And this is where we would love to get your feedback. Send us an email and let us know what that feedback looks like, because we believe that there's a season for each of us. And while we might not each put ourselves in the same season, all of those seasons will play together for a great harvest. And that's the message today, I believe. I believe that this is about having different seasons come together, just like there's different people who have different skills, different gifts, different talents. Some of them may not have been realized. Let's put it in our season of realization, where we get real and have that conversation, and we say, you know what, you've been gifted this. This would be a great asset to solve this problem in our community. And we often, too often, talk about violence. I want to take ourselves out of a season of violence and put ourselves into a season of restoration. And that truly takes all of us. It takes all of us. You hear us say that all the time. It's not just something we say. We believe that. It takes all of us. We're here. We're sitting here trying to do that.
But do you know how we turn off that season of violence?
Yeah.
We stop looking inward and we start looking outward. We start looking at, how can I, if I'm going to use the word I.
But you're not in the season I.
No. But how do I impact the lives of others? How do I help others?
Right.
Because that can be contagious if you do it. Let someone see you do it. But more importantly, let them know that you mean it when you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this can go in a whole different sideways direction, so I won't go too deep into details at this moment, because I want to keep the conversation going. But I'll just tell you this, our hands each have 5 fingers. That's 10 fingers in total for the most of us. And, I look back at the Bible and I see a God who created the heavens and the earth with 1 finger, a point and a command. And I say to ourselves, how many things can we do that get lost in the details of what we're doing, when in fact there's more to the story? And so we have this gift, we have this capability. And so if it's a season of impact, then we're asking you to come along for a season of impact. If it's a season of help, a season of caring, a season of interest, a season of calling, a season of any type of involvement, increase. You want increase, a season of increase? Help us increase safety in the city. And these things will pay back individually to those that are taking themselves out of the season of I, for those that are taking themselves out of the season of control, and for those that are putting themselves into a season of obedience, into a season of caring, into a season of impact. Like, I believe that you can have this thought, and if you emotionally, mentally, and physically put yourself in that season, that the harvest will be great.
Here's the thing I'm going to step out boldly and say about this podcast. This podcast is very intentional for the purposes of of bringing faith to relationships and to community. This podcast is something that is done with great intention to bring God and the perspective of what God is to us back to our community and have enlightened conversations about him and all that he has done for us, and that how can we actually serve him better by being good stewards to one another.
Well, speaking of good stewards to one another, we're expanding our horizons. I'm excited that we're in this new studio today because I feel like this gives us the opportunity to expand our arena for more guests, for more people that have value to add. But we are taking this show on the road, Curtis.
Woohoo!
We are. So you talk about packing suitcases.
Or the bells, man. What?
Yeah. You talk about packing suitcases. I'm going to need you to pack light.
Okay. All right.
But
I can do that.
For those that are watching us, we're super excited. We are taking this. We're taking this podcast on the road. We are going to journey out of the state, even, and we are going to go visit with people in other communities that have similar issues going on that are tied directly to the communities here. And we're going to broadcast from those areas, and we're going to play events and shows and things that we do, maybe even a behind-the-scenes look or two at the journey itself, because I think there's going to be a season of learning in this journey. And we're going to broadcast that out. We'll save the venues and the destinations because we love a little bit of suspense, but we are going to take this show on the road because there is a message to be had. And if we're going to be in a season of learning, we need to go places and learn from others so that we can bring back the best, the greatest ideas and try to invest them in the crops and harvest that we are playing here in the city of Mobile.
I was going to ask you a second ago, but you've already answered it. And the question was going to be, why is it important for us to actually go abroad outside of our area?
Well, I mean, I think people say broaden your horizons all the time, and they don't really know exactly what that means. I think to broaden your horizons, you literally have to get outside perspective. So inside of us, we have ideas and we have initiative. You couple that, what's coming out of the inside of us, with what's coming out of the inside of others, and together brews this idea of reflection. And you're like, hey, we can sharpen our iron by conversing with other people, seeing other people. And also there may be individuals we know, because we've done some research, in some communities that are dealing with a season of violence. And we want to go to that community and we want to see what's happening in that season of violence and figure out how to get not only them out of a season of violence, but what tools, trades, techniques, things that we can be employed here that'll come back and help us remove ourselves from a season of violence and place us directly into a season of restoration.
And not only that, I think that it helps us to understand that this thing that we're dealing with right now in society is so much larger than just this city. It has everything to do with the things that we don't want to talk about, but the things we're going to talk about because we need to, and that is our relationship with God and where we are in our society, absent of him, that lends itself to creating this very common denominator that we're seeing every day in society, that we're all impacted by, and we want solutions for it, but we're hesitant at best to even say out loud why.
So I'll leave it to you like this, because I'm going to let you have the final thought as we wind down. Please send us your emails. Call our anonymous tip line, 844-251-0644. But I see this: new studio, new adventures, and new passion. That's what we do now, to go out amongst those that want to help, recruit those that aren't sure how they can help, and find those that have run away and bring them back to the effort so that we can restore our own community and all of those along the Gulf Coast. That's what our mission is here. And we keep it within the four corners. We talked about faith, family, education, and government. Like, those are the four corners. We keep faith at the center of it all. Final thoughts. I flip to you before we tune out for the week, Curtis.
I'll just say this to everyone who takes time out to watch our podcast. Stay with us. Share with us your thoughts. Know that what we're trying to do here is create a conversation that's not being had. It's no longer being had at our kitchen tables. Is honestly not being had in many places that you would think it should be had. And until we do, we will continue to see the manifestation of the problem that we have today. So stay with us. Let us know what your thoughts are, and we would love to actually engage you where you are, whether we bring you to the studio or whether we meet you where you are, because the conversation is important.
Well, I can just tell you this, spoiler alert, we're coming to a front porch near you. We're not going anywhere. We believe we're on the right path. We need your help to do it. We certainly are going to move forward and try to make our community, your community, everyone's community, the safest and best community that it can be, the one that it has the potential to be. And that is really the riveting reason behind this. We always ask for God's protection in this effort, but we're going to bring the conversation because we're going to be in a season of obedience to do it. And we're going to be direct about it as well. And so that's the message for today. We thank you for joining us not only on a Friday at 8:30 in our Echoes Top Live podcast, but in our new podcast studio. And hopefully here soon in the next couple of weeks, you'll be seeing us on a little road trip with an adventure that will revolutionize and radically change the way we approach restoring our community. Thank you. It truly takes all of us. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next Friday at 8:30 on the Echoes Top Live podcast.